Alright guys, today we are going to talk about trend lines and correlation. So before we can begin talking about trend lines and correlation, I want to introduce you to the concept of a scatter plot. Okay, scatter plots are used to illustrate the relationship between two groups of data. Okay, so think of a table. Okay, you have your x values and you have your y values. Have a whole bunch of points that you can plot on the coordinate plane, and they're all over the place. They make up a scatter plot. Okay? Once we have a scatter plot, so once we have a whole bunch of points plotted on our graph, we can draw a trend line. A trend line is drawn to show the relationship more clearly. Alright, there's also something called the line of best fit, which can be found with graphing calculators or spreadsheets. It is an exact equation of the trend line. So let's look at an example. Or before we look at the example, let's look at the steps. We're going to carefully estimate and draw a trend line that by visual inspection minimizes the distance to the data points. So you want to draw your trend line as close as possible to most of the lines. Choose 2 points on the trend line. So not 2 points that are already graphed, but 2 points that are actually already on the trend line. Once we have that, we will find the equation of the line passing through those 2 points. Again, the 2 points that are on the trend line. Let's look at an example. Here we have a scatter plot. So notice the points are all over the place, right? We would not be able to connect this line. It would be up here and then up here again. Like, it would not be a straight linear line, okay? So this is called a scatter plot. Now we can go ahead and draw our trend line, and we're going to draw it. Let's say the last recording we had was in 2004. That's the last time we recorded how much money we made. Let's say I want to predict how much money we're going to make in 2010. We don't know yet. It's not 2010 yet. The last year that we recorded money was in 2004. But using this trend line that's going to extend linearly this way, we can estimate how much money we're going to make even in the future. Okay, so in 2010, we'll estimate that we're going to make almost $19 million. Alright, so now we know what interpolation is. We know what extrapolation is. So that's how trend lines are helpful to us. Well, how accurate is our data? Okay, interpolation, the one whenever we are estimating within our set of data points, is going to be more accurate when we're doing extrapolation, because extrapolation is in the future. It's outside of the given data that we know to be true. Okay? There's also something called linear correlation. Linear correlation describes how closely the data points are clustered along the trend line. Do our data points almost touch the trend line? Is there a lot on the trend line? Or are some of our data points way off of our trend line? So depending on that, it's going to tell you how accurate our trend line is. There is a strong correlation, we call it strong, when the majority of the points are close to the line. So if you have a big clump against the trend line, and they're all really closely against the trend line, it's strong. They're together, they're united. Okay? So data with stronger correlations are more likely to produce accurate predictions. If we are closer to our data points, we're going to be closer to saying the truth. Data with a trend line going from the lower left to the upper right is positive. Okay, so climbing uphill, think of it like that, positive. Okay, data with a trend line from upper left to lower right is negative. It's going downhill. All right, so let's look. Strong positive correlation. So notice that the points are pretty much together. We could draw a trend line right through here if we wanted to, and they're pretty much all together, and it's positive. It's going upwards, right? This is a weak positive correlation. So notice that it's still going upwards, right? Still traveling uphill, but the dots are pretty spread out, right? So that's a weak correlation. They're not standing together. They're not standing strong. All right, here's a strong negative correlation. So even though it's going downwards, the points are clustered together, they're clumped together. If we were to draw a trend line, most of those points would be pretty close. Compared to our weak negative correlation, even though it's still going downwards, if we were to draw a trend line, there are some points that are going to be way off. If this is positive or negative, it's kind of just a blob. Okay, and since we can't tell if it's going upwards or downwards, we don't really know where to draw our trend line, so there's no really correlation. There's no correlation. That's it for this lesson.